Inversions are game changers when it comes to adding smoothness and fluidity to your chord progressions. Mastering these shapes is one of the quickest ways to level up your playing and make every transition sound seamless. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through how I practice these inversions to really lock them into my muscle memory. And I'm also going to share a simple trick that makes inversions so much easier to understand. And I'll give you a clue. It's all about your little finger. Let's dive in. Let's begin by reminding ourselves exactly what an inversion is, right? So we're going to take a root position triad. This is a D major root position triad. We've got the root there, we've got the third, and we've got the fifth. It's super simple to get inversions, right? All you do is you take this bottom note, the D, and you put it up at the top. And you kind of rearrange the notes. So that's a first inversion there. And then if we do exactly the same thing again, we've moved that F sharp that was there, we've moved that up the octave. We've now got a second inversion triad, okay? So we've got our three different shapes. Now, just as a little disclaimer, some of you might be thinking, oh, I thought inversions was where you change the bass note. That kind of thing, you see? Where you put like, that would be D over F sharp or D over A. I'm not doing that type of inversions here. So why do we actually need inversions and why do they sound good? Well, let me give you an example, right? I'm just gonna play a chord sequence in the key of D, right? And I'm gonna play all of the shapes as root position. And when I say the shapes, I mean the chords I'm using in my right hand, okay? So every chord will be in root position in my right hand. Have a listen to what it sounds like. You see, it's just jumping about all over the place. It sounds basic, it sounds a bit bland. Let me do the same thing again, exactly the same chord sequence, but I'm gonna use inversions in my right hand. Just have a listen to the difference. I'll do another example. Everything just has a bit more of a pathway. Each note has a pathway to follow that kind of takes you through the sequence. Everything's a bit more fluid and it just takes you on a bit more of a journey rather than being these kind of spiky chord changes. I'll do one more. The difference is just massive, right? So I'm going to break down exactly how you can get these shapes into your playing. Now we're going to do everything today in the context of one chord sequence. Let me just take you through that now. It's in the key of D and we're going to go D, A, which is chord 5, C, which is flat 7, and then G, which is chord 4. So that whole sequence is going to go D, A, C, G. Okay, we're going to keep it super simple, just like 2 bars, right? The first thing we need to do is get all of those inversions for all of those different chords into our right hand. So we've already done D, which is there. There's our different inversions. Now let's have a look at A. So A, there's our root position shape. There's our first inversion shape. And there's our second inversion. It's really interesting, actually. Someone told me once, you've got to think of inversions like a house. If you think of the ground floor of a house, right? Root position is like the ground floor. The ground floor isn't the first floor. No, it's the ground floor. Then the next floor up is the first floor. Do you see that? And that's exactly the same with inversions. You've got the ground floor there, the root position, the first inversion, which is like the first floor, and then the second inversion, which is the same as the second floor. Yeah, I think you've got it, right? But that's a good way of thinking about it. People get confused because they think the first inversion is like the first position you play. It's not, okay? Root, first inversion, second inversion. So there are A major shapes. And we're going to do exactly the same thing for the flat 7, for the C chord. There's our root position. There's our first inversion. There's our second inversion, okay? And then we're going to do lastly, we're going to do our G major chord, right? So we've got our root position, first inversion, second inversion. Okay, there they all are. Now we need to find a way to practice these shapes and get them really embedded in our playing. And one of the things I get piano players to do often is to not ever start in root position, okay? When you want to practice inversions, don't practice starting everything in root position, okay? In other words, don't practice all your shapes like that, where you begin in root position, then go first, then go second. Because what we're doing there is we're internalizing that whenever we see a major chord symbol, we go to a root position shape, which we kind of want to avoid, okay? Out of all of the different inversions, root position kind of sounds the most basic. So it's really good to practice starting with an inversion. So this is a little exercise we're going to do, okay? And the exercises in this video get progressively harder. So we're going to start here in second inversion on each of the chords in our sequence. And we're going to go up from there, right? There's our first move on our D major chord. I'll do it again. Then we're going to do exactly the same thing on the A chord. We start in second inversion and go up all the different shapes like that. Let's do exactly the same thing on the C. Then the same thing on the G. Okay, quite a lot to take in there. By the way, I've put this all together for you in a completely free PDF lesson book. It's got the notation for every single step I'm covering in this video. It's got the notation along with different tips. It's also got the backing tracks I'm going to be using a little bit later on as well. So you can really get this into your playing. The link to download that is in the video description. Go ahead and grab that. It's completely free. I hope you find it really useful. I'm now going to have a go at playing through that sequence. Just to remind you, we're going to do second inversion, root position, and then first inversion on every single chord. And I'll give you a little tip, right? Think about your little finger. This is going to come in useful a little bit later on when we go through. But I'm always going to be putting my little finger when we go to a new chord on the third. So when we go to the D chord at the beginning, my little finger starts on the third. And when I go to the A chord, it goes to the C sharp. Do you see that? And it does that on every single chord. Same with the C chord. You didn't spot that there. It was on the E, which is the third of C. And then the same with the G chord. It started on the B. And your little finger is going to come in very, very useful later on when we start trying to craft little roots through the progression. So just be aware where your little finger is sitting on those chords. Okay, let's give this a go with the backing track. Go again. Now that's a really great exercise to get you going with inversions. But the thing is, if I was playing a slow song in that kind of style, like a piano ballad, I wouldn't play like this. I wouldn't go through every single inversion arpeggiating up. It sounds basic, it doesn't really flow, and it sounds like an exercise. It doesn't sound like music yet. So what we need to do now is look at a way of combining all of the different inversions to craft a pathway through our sequence. Okay, and to do that, we're going to look at the closest inversion available to us, right? Now, this seems a lot more complicated than it actually is. Just bear with me with this, right? So, we're going to think about our little finger. So that's where we're going to start, okay, on this D major chord. We're in a second inversion shape. But we're not actually even going to think about that. We're going to take away the rest of my right hand and just leave that little finger on the third of the D chord, and I'm going to be playing the root notes in my left hand. So that's where we're going to focus. We're just going to focus on that melody note at the top. So the next chord in the sequence is an A major chord, and I need to find the next available note in a downwards direction that fits with that A major chord. So I know it will either be maybe a half step or a whole step away, a tone or a semitone. Might be more, but it's probably going to be one of those two. Or it might even be the same note I'm already on. Okay, so in this case, it's not the same note I'm already on because F sharp doesn't fit into an A chord. If I move a tone down to that E, I'm then on the 5th of that A chord. Do you see that? So far, I've got D with the F sharp at the top, going to an A with an E at the top. I then need to move to a C major chord. Now, I'm going to change the root note. I call this plotting your route through a sequence, right? Plotting your route. I'm plotting where my right hand's going to go. I can actually stay on the same note. Do you see that? I can stay on that E, okay? The E remains the same, and it's great when a note remains the same between two chords because it just glues everything together and it keeps something consistent amongst the chord change. So that's where we can go for that C chord. Just stay on that E. And then when we go to the G, it's there, isn't it? It's the D, which is the 5th of the G major chord. So let me just put it together, right? Now you may be thinking, God, that's so much processing that's going on when you're doing all this stuff. The more and more you practice this, the more and more these things will become like reflex reactions. So much music follows the same kind of chord sequence. So the more you practice going through these different chord sequences and mapping out your route, the more and more you're going to come across the same chord sequences where you can do those same movements. So it's not like every chord sequence is different. You're going to notice patterns, right, as you go through. So I'm now going to have a go. Now I've got my melody note, my little finger, where I've plotted that route of where I'm going to go. I now need to just fill in the rest of the chords. So there's our D major chord. There's our A major chord, there's our C, and there's our G. I'll do that once more for you. Occasionally, you might find if you're continually moving in a downwards direction, it might get a bit low and muddy. You know, if you're constantly moving downwards, you're going to need to go up again at some point, because if I start getting down here, I mean, everyone's got a personal preference of where it gets too muddy, right? But for me, anywhere down here is beginning to get very muddy. So you may then want to jump back up. But for the moment, when we're up here, I think it's fine. Sounds nice, it rings out, it's right in the center of the piano. Sounds great. Okay, let's see if we can do the same thing in a different position. So we're taking the same chord sequence and we're finding a different route through. So let's now do the root position one, okay? Let's start in root position. So my little finger's on that note, okay? I'm going to take the rest of these notes away and just map my root out with my little finger. So I'm going to start there. I need to go to the A chord. It's great, it can stay the same. Do you see that? That A stays the same on both of those chords. Now how do I get to the C chord in a downwards direction? What note fits in? It's the G. There it is. And, oh, look at this. It stays the same when we go to the G as well. Brilliant, 2 notes that stay the same. So if I fill in the chords, do you see that? It's about breaking that process down. By mapping out the root of your little finger, you're giving yourself some clarity over where you're going, and then it becomes so much easier to add in those other 2 notes. If you try and process it all at once, it's a lot to take on. But if you just think root note, little finger melody note, and then add the rest of your notes in your right hand, it makes it so much easier. Let's do the last one. So we now need to start with a D at the top. We've started with an F sharp at the top before, we've started with an A at the top before, and now we've got a D at the top, right? All through the same sequence. So where can I go to get that A major chord? Well, I go down to there, don't I? The C sharp, which is the 3rd of the A major chord. Now, how do I get to the C chord? Well, our little finger just moves down a semitone, half step again. How do I get to the G? It's a B. There we go, watch. If I fill in the rest of the chords, there it is. So why is this so useful? Well, it means now that we've got 3 different pathways through the same sequence. And I'd actually not be thinking first inversion, second inversion, root position now. I'd move away from that. And I just think about the note at the top of my voicing. And that should trigger the rest of the chord because you've already practiced those chords going up the different inversions, right? So we've got that one, that pathway through, where we start on an F sharp at the top. Then we've got the one where we go through here, which begins on an A at the top. And then we've also got that one there, which began with a D at the top. So we've got kind of 3 different roots. Do you notice the higher you go, it sort of adds an extra level of energy to the sequence as well. Do you see that? It's all about having different colours that you can paint the same sequence with, right? Now again, this is all written out for you as part of that PDF lesson book, so do go ahead and grab that. The link is in the video description. It's really helpful, particularly if you want a bit of a structure to follow, to really get this into your playing. What we're gonna do before we play this through with a track is we're just gonna add a little bit of rhythm. Now, if you're someone who's doing this for the first time, getting these inversions, and you're thinking, okay, I just need to get these shapes down, maybe skip this step. But if you're thinking, oh, I think I've got this, I think I've kind of got these shapes down, give this rhythm a little go, just to give it a little bit more of a kind of musicality while we're playing it. So, you know what's coming, right? We're gonna do a toggle pattern on every single chord, okay? And just keep it really simple and just toggle those notes. I've explained this before on the channel, that's why I'm laughing. I've done quite a few videos where I've referenced the toggle, and the more and more I sort of are listening to different pieces of music, the more and more I notice it's just in so many styles of music. But anyway, I'll do another video on that another time. But check this out. We're just gonna move between the upper part of our hand and our thumb. Exactly the same shape, but just toggle between the upper part and the lower part of our hand, our thumb. Okay, and that gives it a little bit of rhythm, just to kind of keep things moving, rather than playing them as block chords where everything goes down at the same time. Okay, so I'm gonna start there, then I'm gonna go up to there, and then I'm gonna go up to there. Okay, so my 3 different pathways. First one's there, second one's there with an A at the top, and the third one is with the D with the top. Is with the D at the top. Got it right? Okay, let's give it a go with the track. Okay, let's jump up. Now we got that A at the top. Jump up again to the D. Getting these inversions down, honestly, is the single biggest thing you can do to take your playing to the next level. I mean, it may seem like quite a long process to go through all the different shapes in a sequence and then map out your root with your little finger. But the more and more you do this, the quicker it will become. And one day you'll be just sitting down improvising, and your right hand will automatically go to the next closest chord shape in a downwards direction. And you'll think, that was worth it. But it takes a little while to get to that point, but I promise you it is coming. The more and more you do this, the more and more you practice, the easier it will become. Thanks so much for watching. And if you're interested in those little rhythm patterns I was hinting at there at the end, check out this video up here where I break down my ultimate guide to rhythm patterns. I think you'll find that one really useful. Go give that video a click, and I'll see you over there.